Do you feel like your trip to Europe was too short?
We cut it short. And we couldn't see people, and it was also cold over there. So we couldn't travel as comfortably as we did. So we just cut off a few days, and that worked out well. So yeah, a little time to do you know, I had to dig it through. Within a 72 hours, since landing in Germany, so that was the timing thing. Everybody gets one. The result of that so you can do that day before back. Just the cold and the fact that you did that a couple of times. So every person was turned into so my sister. Just the way it is. The end result was the world all have kind of understanding for us, and we have to keep in shape and stay healthy. Every time I travel, I see me in the group much older than me. So I tell myself, we have those people, you know, some people clearly are. Making me very good about the groups that we go with, following their level of and we exercise before our lives. We really have to begin, and I've told you this before, and I'll say it again, we have somebody new with us, so please be on your best behavior, you know.
It does.
Thank you, Jackie.
You're welcome.
Lovely as always. Good morning. It is, we're all at the Treasure Coast Unitarian Universalist congregation in Stuart, Florida. Today is Sunday, October 24th, 2021. We are a welcoming congregation. We welcome people of all gender identities, races, ages, and backgrounds. It's wonderful to see all our vaccinated and masked members in the sanctuary this morning. And we're also on YouTube. And if you are listening and you'd love to be put on our email list, please just go to our website at tcuuc.org. Then you'll get announcements in the Friday online newsletter. If we have any visitors who might be comfortable stepping up to the microphone and telling us who you are, we would love to welcome you in that way.
No, I outgrew shyness at about 4. My name is Anita Gagnon, and I'm from Palm City now, originally from Connecticut. And I was a member of a Hartford UU congregation for a while, and I just needed to get out of the freaking house.
Wonderful. We're so glad you're with us today. As far as announcements, we have a number of announcements. Beginning tomorrow, we're going to have games in Heston Hall from 1 to 3. And there's going to be Hand and Foot is a card game that you'll be introduced to if you do not know. And Marguerite told me, especially this morning, to state that if you do not prefer cards or don't want to try that game, please come anyway. There will be other games. And this is going to happen every other Monday from 1 to 3. So that's easy to keep track of. Also, on the first and third Tuesdays at Stewart Veterans Memorial Park, we are continuing to have our brown bag lunch. And I think this past Tuesday was a record crowd. We had 2 picnic tables filled and a number of people in lawn chairs. So that's a really fun, casual way to regroup and see people during the week. Also, our book club, we are starting this Wednesday at 11 o'clock. We are starting a new book, an older, very light book about hiking the Appalachian Trail, and the name is A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson. So if you would like to be on the Zoom call, this is done by Zoom, please see John Moore. John, maybe you'll raise your hand. You can see him, and you can be put on the link for that beginning this Wednesday. Big thank you to the people who are helping with the service this morning. Jackie Robbins has been just our savior for weeks and weeks now, and so we thank Jackie for being with us. Greeters and ushers, our host, Karina Poloni, and tech wizard, Chris McGann. After the service this morning, you might have noticed, as last week, we have tables set up in the narthex and also a little bit outside. We have the doors open, so we feel that we have permission to stay and mingle with bottled water and cookies that are in little individual packages. Okay, so we feel like that. Last week, I think everybody just enjoyed that immeasurably. So we invite you to stay for that. I think it's time to light the chalice. As the chalice is lit, we are reminded that as you use, we are encouraged to go deeper with the biggest questions of meaning, purpose, and possibility. Let us live with more wisdom, more connection, and more compassion. As I thought about opening words, searching for something that touched where we are, and who really knows where that is? Are we really on the cusp of the end of this pandemic or not? I came upon a UU suggestion entitled, "We gather as many drops." We gather as many drops, each winding our own path down life's surfaces and ruts. Here we pool together as a single body, flowing together for a time. Together we are a stream, at times even a river, for with our shared force, we can travel toward oceans of meaning and seas of connection. These words seem to touch the spirit felt last Sunday as we lingered in the narthex and outside, anticipating the strength we might generate together. Now let us sing or hum through our mask. I think you can sing. Enter, rejoice.
Sing along.
Let's see.
361.
361.
Yeah, I have to recognize who I am. Here we go. Little intro. Enter, rejoice in the Lord. Enter, rejoice in the Lord. Let be a golden land. Enter, rejoice in the Lord. Sing song. Open your ears to the song. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice. Open your eyes, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. May be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice. Some change. Don't be afraid, some change. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice. Give or take a verse.
And now for our affirmation. Let us recite our affirmation, speaking the first verse and singing the second. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
This is our time for sharing joys and sorrows. We invite you to tell us what's happening in your life that is a joy or a sorrow. And we ask that in the hope that we'll know each other better, be more real to each other, and be supportive. We ask you to keep it personal and to keep it brief, and to come to the microphone and tell us your matter of joy or sorrow, and then to move a stone from the full plate to the empty river, symbolic river there. Was I supposed to say anything else? I've been away from this for a while. I think you know what you're to do now. Who has a matter of joy or sorrow to share? Please.
Hi, I'm Judy Shaloni, and I heard from an old friend yesterday, and she had just gotten out of the hospital, and she was really terrified. So she asked me to pray for her, and I'm asking all of us to join together and do that.
Anyone else?
I'm Ronnie Dembowski, and I have a joy. My uncle, my only living relative still around, who lives in his own house with his 90-year-old wife, was 101, and he still drives, and he still cooks for them, and does all these crazy things. And I have good genes on that side, so.
Anyone else? Anyone? Then we'll move one for those matters we haven't said out loud, but we all carry in our hearts and minds. And this represents a concern, a joy, a sorrow of yours. And for a meditation, I found this in the back of the hymnal by Mary Oliver, entitled Morning Poem. Every morning the world is created. Under the orange sticks of the sun, the heaped ashes of the night turn into leaves again and fasten themselves to the high branches, and the ponds appear like black cloth on which are painted islands of summer lilies. If it is your nature to be happy, you will swim away along the soft trails for hours, your imagination alighting everywhere. And if your spirit carries within it the thorn that is heavier than lead, if it's all you can do to keep on trudging, there is still somewhere deep within you a beast shouting that the earth is exactly what is wanted. Each pond with its blazing lilies is a prayer heard and answered lavishly every morning. Whether or not you have ever dared to be happy, whether or not you have ever dared to pray. Mary Oliver. And now some moments of silence. And now hymn 123, Spirit of Life. We hum, we sing. Is there a link we're using today? Oh, you're the link.
I'm with a little help from a friend. It will be a short intro, and then
And now we invite you to share in our ministry with the morning offering. The offering represents our gratitude and our generosity. So please, please express yours. And now will the ushers that I forgot to ask come forward to get the plates for the offering. I found a video of a choir from Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and I think you'll enjoy it. I hope you can read the words off the bottom of the screen because the words are really reaching.
We thrill to hear life, and in the strength of love, and we have found the time to be together, and with the grace of age, we share the wonder, and we believe that glory is an answer. Our lives are full of wonder, and our time is very brief. The death of one upon us fills us all with pain and grief. But as we live, so shall we die, and when our lives are done, the memories we share with friends, they will linger on and on. And we believe in life, and with the strength of love, and we have found a place to be together. We have the right to grow. We have the gift to believe that this within our living is an answer. We seek use answers to the questions of this life. We seek to put an end to all the waste of human strife. We search for truth, equality, and blessed peace of mind. When we come together here, make sense of what we find. And we believe in life, and in the strength of love, and we have found our joy being together. And we have searched for peace, living the life we see, even to question truly is an answer.
I have to say, when I found that, I loved it, but I had to ask, how did they find 8 white people who could sing that well? But they did. And we have to be inclusive, and we are. Anyhow, life has surprises. I want to say a word about next Sunday because it's different for me. I've done services through my career that had a wedding as a part or ended in a wedding. And remember, we did some services here, one that ended in a wedding and a couple that ended with very senior people reaffirming their vows. Like the couple we will be memorializing next Sunday. But I've never done a service that was also a memorial service as our worship service on Sunday morning. I'm looking forward to it. Some really great music is included. Jackie has prepared a number of things. Bruce will be at the piano and is looking forward to being with us for that weekend. Bruce Ruby, our former pianist. And there are a number of special things being added. I've got a feeling, even with 3 ministers here and these musicians and others, the most memorable part is going to be Enid and Vince singing to each other on a video. That will be the middle of the service. And I've mentioned to the family that I'll have boxes of Kleenex available. But anyway, the service, I think, is going to be full of wonder because it's all about these 2 people who will always be with us next Sunday. I've said before, if you know somebody that's not here and you think they would rather not miss it, please feel free to call them and tell them you just want to be sure they know about the service next Sunday. My topic today isn't about sermons. They somehow seem to come, hopefully, from life and reality. There are three sources of sermon creation I've heard: inspiration, perspiration, and desperation. I have visited the website for clergy, desperatepreachers.com, only to conclude I can't be that desperate. You might think otherwise. When I was hired as a part-time minister here, after I had filled in a few times, some questions came up in the interview that I suspected might reflect a UU allergy. Would I feel the need to bring up God a lot? Or would I feel the need to add what I think God would say in our religious discussions, as if I knew? My answer was, I wouldn't. If God comes up, you will bring her up. If any of you watch the Father Brown mysteries on PBS, and in the past year or two, we found ourselves watching a lot of things we hadn't watched before. Father Brown, kind of an adorable, even though always adorned in that black clerical gown with umbrella. He always seems to know where God is in the plot and what God has to say. But he gets by because they are usually forgiving words. In all my years of ministry, the issues of God or presumed thoughts of God rarely came up. But when they did, they were frequently under the umbrella topics of fear and guilt. And when somebody brought up God, fear and guilt were often the context. And I tried to say in response, the God I believe in is about love and affirmation. Because many people think of ministers as having answers about pretty serious matters, and because most ministers don't seem to disabuse their folks of that misconception, well, ministers, this one anyway, spoke of things we really didn't know much about. I often wish I had been more comfortable with silence, or the Quaker way. Let's just be quiet and await inspiration. Even my original denomination is known more for activism or activity more than for practicing and trusting in silence. In one of the books of our midweek book discussion, Carl Sagan's Varieties of Religious Experience, the author makes the point that with developing sciences, there is much less for God to do in the universe. He calls it what others have called it, the God of the gaps, the God who is hauled in to explain things we can't otherwise explain. This is a very old ploy, usually called the will of God. People used to think it provided comfort to say a horrible tragedy or a natural disaster had to be accepted as the will of God. What terrible, cold comfort. An English theologian named Leslie Weatherhead in the last century, the 1900s, heard all of that he could take and wrote a seminal work called The Will of God. The last straw for Weatherhead was hearing about a missionary's child in India. The infant had been placed in a bassinet and left to sleep on an open porch and died of typhoid or malaria or something. And the missionary wrote to Weatherhead that he could accept his child's death only because it must have been God's will. Weatherhead knew it was the lack of a net over the bassinet. The will of God idea has been terribly abused. Rabbi Kushner's great book is When Bad Things Happen to Good People, not Why Bad Things Happen. One of the chapters is titled, Sometimes There Is No Reason. He writes pretty eloquently that it is better for us to live with that, no discernible reason for something befalling our loved one or ourselves, than to haul in God and end up with a deity whose behavior or inaction is worse than ours. There have been too many times when I haven't known what to say, but I had to say something. You have no doubt had such times. A long time ago, good friends of ours lost a son. He took his life and left a note to let his parents know that he blamed them for his life not being worth living. I didn't want to, but I had to lead the service. I know why ministers often protect themselves by talking in generalities. That's also why the caricature of our profession is one of smiling irrelevance and of unreality. All I could think to say at that tragic boy's service was, what would they say to him if they could? They would say they felt guilty, excruciatingly guilty, like if they had done something differently, it might not have happened. They would also say they felt angry with him for rendering them so helpless to do anything about their relationship with him. They would have improved it if they could, but they didn't know how. And now, of course, they couldn't. And ultimately and lastly and lastingly, they would want to say to him that they loved him. Fallibly, for sure, but they loved him and would go on loving him. A woman in two of my Long Island churches taught me a lot about the limits of counseling. I say two of my churches because she and her family came to one, and then when I moved to a larger church 5 miles away, she and her family decided to follow me there. For about 15 years, she would come and talk to me. She was under the care of psychiatrists with much medication for depression. She struggled with it greatly, and I found myself unable or unwilling to accept that I could not really help. I also found it tormenting that she would not or could not follow up on just about any suggestion I would make. In the face of all kinds of negativity and pessimism she would bring up, I felt I had to suggest something. I really believed in walking for mental health. I still do. A therapist I went to for a while told me walking was better for the head than for the rest of the body. It was good for that too, although my knees have had a different take on that. When you're the minister full-time and someone keeps coming to you and asks for an appointment, you can't say, only if you have taken up walking for your mental health. And if not for your mental health, then to humor your minister. Our relationship ended when after 13 years in that church, I left the state for another church. The reason I tell you this is because at the last session we had together, she gave me this reading by an anonymous writer. When I ask you to listen to me and you start giving advice, you have not done what I asked. When I ask you to listen to me and you begin to tell me why I shouldn't feel that way, you are canceling out my feelings. When I ask you to listen to me and you feel you have to do something to solve my problem, you have failed me, strange as that may seem. Listen. All I asked is that you listen. not talk or do, just hear me. And I can do for myself. I am not helpless, maybe discouraged and faltering, maybe lonely and isolated and grieving and searching, but not helpless. When you do something for me that I can and need to do for myself, you contribute to my fear and to my weakness. But when you accept as a simple fact that I do feel what I feel, no matter how irrational, then I can stop trying to convince you and can get about the business of understanding what's behind this irrational feeling. And when that's clear, the answers are obvious, and I don't need advice. Perhaps that's why prayer works sometimes for some people, because God is quiet and doesn't try to give advice or to fix things. So please listen and just hear me. And if you want to talk, wait a minute for your turn, and I'll listen to you. Well, all of a sudden, I did know what to say. Why didn't you give this to me at the beginning? And I would have known it was all right not to know what to say. And then again, maybe I wouldn't. Deborah Tannen's book came out about that time. Remember her title? You Just Don't Understand. Her bombshell idea was that when women tell men a problem or a feeling, men feel like they have to fix it. And after they think they have fixed it by offering advice, how I would handle that, well, they don't want to go on discussing it. And women, she wrote, just want to be heard, want to be listened to. When I read that, I thought, I'm not to blame. God or Mother Nature is. That's how she made us. 3 people in my church gave me that book for Christmas. You just don't understand. And at that point, I needed a book entitled, Bob, You Will Not Be Defensive. Deborah Tannen appeared a couple weeks ago on the op-ed pages with Not All Interruptions Are Rude. She calls these conversational interruptions cooperative overlapping. I want to read just a bit of it. Cooperative overlapping is a particularly active form of what I call participatory listenership. All listeners must do something to show they haven't mentally checked out of a conversation. If they don't, the speaker will have trouble continuing. As you know, if you've ever talked to a screen full of motionless faces or a room full of blank stares, signs of listening can range from nodding to an occasional or or a shower of them, to a murmured, I would have done the same thing, to repeating what the speaker just said, to interjecting briefly with a similar story, then yielding to the floor back. Even true interruptions, if they're mutual, can rev up the conversation, inspiring speakers to greater conversational heights. The adrenaline makes the mind grow sharper and the tongue more eloquent. Archaeologists and linguists have described overlapping talk as enthusiastic participation in various cultures around the world. Now, I wondered, where might I try this? Maybe at the next board meeting. It might feel like a rude interruption, but I'm really cooperatively overlapping, actually fortifying your line of reasoning. Oh, you'd rather fortify yourself? Well, that sounds rude. No, not really. But it was an interesting take on interruptions. I'm glad that none of you have just right now tried to practice that. To conclude my topic, when words don't come, it's often better not to force them and to do something other than words. What we can offer each other when we care enough is presence. We can't know why a lot of things happen, but we can help each other pick up the pieces when they do. When our lives fall apart or we must live them under great stress or threats of our undoing, the presence of others trying to hold on to us, that's the greatest gift we can give. If deity, divinity, spirituality aren't in our longing to connect with and support other human beings, I don't know what else to believe or even why I would want to. I know I hope to live my life so that what I believe doesn't have to be spoken. If I haven't, then no eloquence would suffice anyway. We don't have to know what to say. I've always thought the indictment of Eliza Doolittle was aimed more at religion and clergy than at Henry Higgins. Words, 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 I'm so sick of words. Is that all you blighters can do? If we needed it, we have certainly been reminded in the past year or two, we don't know what to say. But with whatever faith and love we can muster, we know what to do. The closing hymn is 121. Love will guide us, and Jackie Robbins will too.
Will guide us, Jesus guide us, and guide us through the way. In the garden, great together, in the garden, Spirit of God, Jesus guide us, hold it to us,
Janet will extinguish the chalice during these closing words, which are from Annie Dillard in the back of our hymnal. We are here to abet creation and to witness to it, to notice each other's beautiful face and complex nature, so that creation need not play to an empty house.
Speaking of creation, I just decided I would like to play the very first movement, the prelude to the Suite Number 1 by Johann Sebastian Bach, the beginning of his 6 incredible suites. for solo cello.